10, Blackbeard, the pirate's pirate. A rough-looking, no-good, rotten privateer who sailed the seas looking for booty to plunder, and I'm not talking about chests of gold. The captain of the Queen Anne's Revenge, a mighty vessel with enough cannons to make any sailor sweat, as well as fierce and intimidating appearances. Captain Blackbeard was said to even tangle fuses in his facial hair and ignite them, making his face appear as if it were in a cloud of fiery smoke. That is crazy. That's like beyond like Post Malone, man. It's a crazy look. While it may seem like theatrics, it was more of a scare tactic, and he was one pirate that was for sure to be feared. Scary dude. Don't cross Blackbeard. The Queen Anne's Revenge. Number 9, Black Bart. Bartholomew Roberts may have been the most successful pirate, at least according to vessels captured, with somewhere ranging a total of 400 ships in his lifetime. Estimated, of course. A vicious and brutal man, he was a natural-born pirate. He spent most of his life on pirate ships before becoming captain himself. He adopted the pirate code and may have been the first pirate to fly colors. Interesting. One thing for sure, there would never be a Welshman so nasty as Black Bart ever again. He was operating all over the globe, America, Canada, South America, Africa. He eventually would meet his end in battle, but was gallantly remembered for his piracy by other pirates. Number 8, Francis Drake. Sic Parvis Magna, greatness from small beginnings. That may sound familiar to PlayStation fans of the Uncharted series. Francis Drake was an English explorer, captain, and Navy expert. He's most well known for travels and circumnavigation. That's all fine and dandy. However, Francis Drake's expeditions weren't exactly without scandal, as they were also pirating expeditions, as the Queen had basically instructed him to plunder Spanish ships and ports on his way. Which he did. Well, why not? The Queen says you gotta do it, you gotta do it. His biggest prize came in March 1579 when he seized the Spanish treasure ship, the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, and liberated it of a dozen chests of coins, 80 pounds of gold, and 26 tons of silver. Wow, that's a lot of loot. He even shared a lot of his booty with his fellow mates and financial backers. Very Robin Hood of you, sir. I commend, yeah, that's nice. Number 7, Grace O'Malley. The golden age of piracy was a long time ago, so yeah, there's not going to be that many female pirates. That's how it goes. However, the female pirates that were around were pretty nasty, and it seems whenever a fair lass gets behind the helm of a ship, they seem to do very well. Like Grace O'Malley. Even at a young age, she was showing signs of rebellious leadership. She was stubborn and in her ways. She cut her hair in defiance as a youth. The girl was stubborn, she wouldn't listen. That grit is what made her a very successful pirate, and to this day, remembered to the Irish as a hero. She's got a couple statues around. I don't have a statue, I wish I did. Number 6, Captain Morgan. Pirate, businessman, and rum. My knowledge of Captain Morgan goes about as far as high school parties in your mom's basement, or enjoying a refreshing cocktail with too much sun at the Coddy and the Muskokas, bro. In actuality, he was a ruthless pirate who made his fortune plundering Spanish ships. Spanish had a lot of trade going to and from the New World, so it kinda just makes sense. Well, after he made his do-re-mi, he did the next sensible thing and invested in some land. And by that I mean he owned plantations, so yeah, he wasn't such a nice dude. Diversifying is great, anyone will tell you that, but not like that. That's not a good business. We don't like that here. Look, a lot of the pirates on this list, his early life is pretty much unknown, so all that's down on record is that he was a devious criminal who oftentimes was trying to dodge the crown. Number 5, Rachel Wall. A very interesting case here, as this may be the only American woman to try her luck at piracy for the time. A runaway at a young age, she eventually found herself sailing the seas with a group of unsavory characters. What makes Rachel join this less than reputable folks on the sea here? Well, it's actually her siren song tactics. Extremely clever and lethal. Rachel Wall's crew and ship were opportunists. Whenever a storm had come through the area, they would brave the storm and then dress the ship as if it had received major damage, or just really look out of luck from the storm. Then take the ship and place it where they knew other vessels full of loot would be passing by. The crew hid, and then they placed the fair lass on the main deck. She lured in ships to their doom, for after they got close, the charade was uncovered and the opposing ship was boarded. It's actually very smart. I wouldn't think of that, because you see a woman out at sea, you gotta go help her, and then there she is, and then, arr, give me your money. I don't know, that's what pirates do, right? They say that, right? Number 4, Calico Jack. Calico for the clothes he wore, and Jack was short for John, because... okay, was he wearing kitties or something? Calico? I don't know. Anyway, Jack was just like all the other pirates out there and on this list. Rootin' tootin', lootin' shootin' cowboy of the seas. Most likely a lack of baths too. That grosses me out. However, one story tells it all. One day while preparing his crew and ship in Cuba, he was ambushed by authorities. He managed to escape to Nassau, which in case you didn't know, it was kind of like Pirate HQ, where they all congregated. Eventually, he was brought before the law. His claim was that he only became a pirate because of Vane. Apparently, this was enough to let him off, where he lived as a law-abiding citizen for about an hour. And then he was back to pirating. I promise I'll be good, sir. Where's the booty? Number 3, Pirate Queen. When people talk about pirates, they think about the crystal clear waters of the Caribbean and the pirates that loomed about that part of the world during the golden age of piracy. However, piracy doesn't mean nice beaches and palm trees. There's still pirates around today, especially around the African coast. There's a lot of pirates there. I don't think a lot of people realize that. However, China in the past was no different from that. A famous pirate from the time was Zhang Yisao, a Chinese woman who inherited a pirate empire from her late husband. She worked with it too. She expanded her husband's empire and became the Empress of the Seas. At one point, she commanded 24 ships personally and oversaw a force of 1,400 pirates. She unified other pirates to join her empire with a fleet estimated to be around 400 junks, which is a fancy name for ships, and around 40,000 pirates, all loyal to the Pirate Queen. She engaged in combat with the East India Company, Portugal, and the Qing Dynasty. She was a bad woman. Bad woman. Number 2, Mary Read. Another female pirate, except this one's a little different. Mary Read hid she was a woman for many years, which begs to differ. How did no dude or man sailor find that out that she was... That's so... okay. She went by the name Mark Read, which is just as effective as Ben Kenobi compared to Obi-Wan Kenobi, so okay. Being a pirate aboard Calico Jack's ship was as fun as you think it was. Eventually the law caught up with all of them. Calico Jack finally got his comeuppance, and her identity was revealed. She turned out to be pregnant, so she got off the hook. Sadly though, she passed away from a fever a few months later, because this is the past and a fever can do that to you. Number 1, William the Kid. We've mentioned everything from cannons and ships to swashbuckling adventures. But what haven't we mentioned? Well, it would be the adventures of William the Kid. Okay, yes, pirate, privateer, bad dude, yes. However, he may be responsible for the most stereotypical pirate traits. For example, the buried treasure, X marks the spot. That's kind of cool, actually.
In at number 10 is Big Pier. His given name was Pier Gerlof Donia, a farmer in the 15th century who had had his village, which is now in modern-day Netherlands, pillaged and his wife violated. Devastated, Piers formed a militia named the Armor Blackheath to fight against the Crusades of the Holy Roman Empire. Pier was a great swords handler, using one that was 7 feet long with ease due to his enormous stature and strength, and so he was named Big Pier, and he inspired some big fear. He had a unique way to identify suspected enemies. He forced them to say a sentence in the Frisian language that, when translated, is butter, bread, and green cheese. If you can't say that, you're not a real Frisian. The words butter, bread, and green cheese were immensely difficult for a Dutchman or a German to pronounce correctly in the Frisian language due to their accents, even when fluent in the language. A careful strategist, Pier was said to have as many as 100 vessels fall to him, and while his original goal was to bring people independence, Big Pier became clouded by power, abandoning the cause for riches. In 1519, after only 4 years of pirating, Pier retired, living out the rest of his life on land until he died peacefully in his sleep. Number 9 is Frenchman Francois Leonas. He too was born under another name, Jean-David Naud, but changed of his own accord to Francois after time's servitude in the Spanish colonies. When released, Francois hated all things Spanish, and that paired very poorly with his inherent violence. He was known for his extreme torture and brutality of others, using his barbaric ways to threaten threaten enemies and the crown alike. The rumors of dismemberment, flaying, guttings, and more reached far and wide in the 17th century. Francois was a brilliant strategist to boot and was able to overpower his enemies in just a few hours, so he was rarely challenged by those who recognized his ship. One of his biggest accomplishments was the ransacking of the city Maracaibo in Venezuela. Believed to be impenetrable with a 16-cannon defense and army, it couldn't stop Francois, and once inside the city, he brutalized innocent civilians to have them admit the location of their treasure. When he found it, enthralled by the wealth, he pressed on and landed at the coast of Cartagena. It's there that karma of his action towards those civilians came back around, and he was torn limb by the inhabitants of the island, and so Francois was feared no more. You really reap what you sow. Number 8 is the scourge of the pirate coast, otherwise known as Rama Ibn Jabir, and the most tolerated pirate that ever infested any seas. Rama was a Bahraini pirate who lived through the 18th century and into the 19th. A violent man, Rama suffered a number of injuries, losing an eye and most of the use of one of his right arms. So that created a terrifying image. What made him so tolerable though was the fact that he was careful to leave British ships alone so as not to anger the crown. His sight was set solely on Al Khalifa, the rival clan to his own, the Al Jalama, who had been at war for nearly 20 years before he even became a pirate. Nearly 2,000 men followed him, and the majority of them were freed African slaves. His brutality was his undoing, however. It actually united the Arab forces to defeat him in the Battle of 1820. Even when defeated, he was determined not to die at the hands of the Al Khalifa. Standing next to gunpowder kegs on his ship, he held his son's hand to look at his crew and the ship and lit the gunpowder. The explosion sank his ship and took everyone with it. Number 7 is the Black Caesar. Caesar starts as a prominent chief in West Africa. He evades colonialists for a while, but eventually is captured and starts the transport process to the USA. But as they neared Florida, a hurricane's sudden appearance threatened the ship. A sailor aboard who had recognized Caesar for his immense strength and keen intelligence snuck below decks and freed him. Making an alliance with one another, the two forced the captain and the crew aside and boarded one of the longboats with munitions and supplies. It's this lifeboat that starts their piracy. Posing as shipwrecked sailors, they would board ships who stopped to assist them, then pull weapons and demand the supplies and the loot. Caesar and the sailor continued this ploy for years, amassing treasure which they buried on Elliot Key, the island that he had made his home. Unfortunately, the term bros before, hadn't been invented yet, and the two dueled over a woman they'd met aboard on one of their looted ships. Caesar blew his friend many years away like that. Turned out to be fine for him though. The lone pirate attracted a small crew that amassed over time until it eventually merged with the famous Edward Blackbeard Teaches Company. When the famous pirate Blackbeard was captured, so was Caesar, and he was one of the pirates alongside him who were sentenced to death by the authorities in Virginia in 1718. Video game people will know this one because number 6 is Anne Bonny. She famously showed up in Assassin's Creed and also in Black Sails and Fina Pirate Princess and much more pop culture. She was an illegitimate child, and when she was betrothed to a man by her father, who she hated, Anne resisted and did the biggest teen rebellion move of the 17th century. She ran away with a pirate. She married John Bonny in 1718, and the two traveled to New Providence, Bahamas, where John became an informant for the governor there. Teen Anne got bored of her husband's newfound politics. She wanted adventure and danger, so again she runs off, this time with pirate John Rackman, aka Calico Jack, in 1720. Calico Jack commandeered the sloop William and had Anne join him as an equal partner. Having a shared captainship wasn't unheard of, but a woman being one of them was. She only ever hid her identity as a woman from other ships. Her own was very accepting of her. It's 1720 that sloop William was raided. Most of the pirates on board were too intoxicated to fight back, and so they were taken to Jamaica for their trials. Bonny won a stay of execution due to her visible pregnancy and was released also because of her father's influence. She had had her exciting years, now she could go back to her normal privileged life. She married, had children, and lived out the remainder happily. All the while, the last words she said to Calico Jack, her husband she left to be executed, was, "Had you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Number 5 is El Perato Confresi. He is well known in Puerto Rico even today. Robert Confresi was initially starting as a sailing merchant, trying to make an honest living. It's due to a devastating economic condition that forced his hand, and Confresi turns to piracy. He started light, targeting ships from the US that were exporting gold. It worked fantastically in his favor as the local government was Spanish and they didn't care to capture him or hand him over to the US government when they requested it be done. It's not their circus, so not their monkeys. That is, until the growing mistreatment of indigenous Puerto Ricans at the hand of Spanish conquistadors hiked up a notch. So Confresi began to target Spanish ships as well, and all bets were off mutually. While Confresi was feared and hated on the seas, in Puerto Rico, he was considered a Robin Hood figure. He brought supplies and security to the indigenous colonies there, earning the public love. It's due to this love and intricate web of contacts, Cofresi evaded capture from vessels from Spain, Gran Colombia, the United Kingdom, Denmark, France, and even the United States, all while commanding several vessels of his own. It took international help for Cofresi to be captured. Spain created an alliance with the West Indies Squadron and the Danish government of St. Thomas. On March 5, 1825, their successful trap meant Cofresi's luck ran out. He was unfortunately executed alongside 11 of his men. Number 4 is the world's wealthiest pirate. Well, was. It was short-lived, as you're about to learn. His name was Samuel Bellamy, and he started off treasure hunting. Don't get it twisted, because he sucked at it and he never found anything, so he figured, I'll just take it from the people who already had found it. Playground logic, you know? Like someone who is not a pirate wanting to become a pirate, he tries to figure things out as he goes. Ship? Check. Crew? Check. Functioning democracy and equality on his ship? That's new. But it endeared him to not only his crew, even captives, as Samuel was incredibly merciful and believed violence wasn't always necessary. With a bunch of happy pirates, you can apparently get a lot of stuff done. In 1 year, Samuel, now Black Sam, was able to capture over 50 ships in the Caribbean and Atlantic. An insane feat only beat out by the legendary capture of the English trade ship, the Whydah. Whydah was filled with over 20,000 pounds of sterling. In modern days, this is an estimated $120 million. This wealth meant the pirates were able to spend the rest of their lives retired. So they headed out for the dreamy retirement location of Massachusetts. 2 months into the journey, one of the worst storms in the area's history sank the ship, killing everyone on board, and now all that sterling lays lost on the seafloor. Number 3 is Viking pirate princess Cela. Woo, this girl's got 3 titles, look at her go. When her younger brother is crowned king of Norway over her, their already very present hatred for one another hits its boiling point. Cela hated her brother Caller's ideals and his intentions for their kingdom, but how could she stop it when he ensured she had no power now that he was in charge? By becoming the second ever female pirate recorded in history. So in 400 AD, Cela took to the North Atlantic, rampaging ships and amassing a powerful reputation and a substantial amount of treasure. Out at sea, this Viking princess turned pirate meets former king of Jutland, Howendel. He also happens to hate her brother, and the two of them dream of defeating Cowler and taking the throne of Norway together. Same time but different place, King Cowler was salty that his former royal rival received far too much glory and reputation in his new role as a pirate. Add insult to injury that he was running around with Caller's hated elder sister, well, he wanted Howendel dead. Caller thought anything they could do, he could do better. So he set out at sea too with his troops and was absolutely annihilated by Howendel when he came face to face. Unfortunately, in order to end that started war, Howendel had to kill his friend Cela in 420 AD. So while little is known why he had to or how he did, one thing we can take away as the moral of the story is that pirates are not always the most loyal friends. Number 2 is the Fearsome Twosome. Born in 1470s to a Turkish father and Greek mother, the boys were raised on the island Lesboa, which was being invaded by the Knights of St. John, a Christian group determined to wage a holy war against the Muslims of the world. They stole Arouge for more than 3 years of forced servitude. When Arouge escapes and returns, he and his heir want to avenge the mistreatment of their family and peoples and become raiders. Feared throughout the Mediterranean, their career as occasional privateers for the Egyptians leads to the brothers' piracy, and they have many lucrative pillages before they began targeting the Spanish. Around that time, Arouge lost his arm to them in battle. By 1516, the Ottoman Sultan had essentially put Arouge in charge of the entire Barbary coast, a position that his heir takes over 2 years later following his brother's death. Arouge's most notorious act before death was capturing the Pope's own trading galley ship. His heir kills it at the job, and in 1533, he's appointed the Grand Admiral of the Ottoman Navy by Suleiman the Magnificent. He led multiple embassies and battles before his retirement in the Ottoman Empire in 1545. Number 1 is considered the most successful pirate of all time, Qing Shi. She's born into poverty in China. Qing works in the red light district before she meets her husband Cheng in 1801. He comes from a family of pirates and had 3 sons, a large inheritance, a ship, and a better life for her. The pair was powerful together, consolidating control of the region's rival pirate gangs into one confederation, the Red Flag Fleet. In 1807, Cheng dies in a boarding accident and Qing takes control. It's a move nobody expects, as women were bad luck to a ship, but that confederation they built together through careful alliances had a strict code of laws. The 70,000 members adhered to those laws, as punishment was severe. Anyone caught giving commands on his own or disobeying those of a superior was immediately decapitated, and Qing reminded them of this. She didn't hesitate to show it either the first time somebody questioned her ability to lead solo. Under her charge, they took control of South China Seas, where they raided and stole so efficiently that they conquered each of the Chinese military's numerous numerous attempts to take down their army, even refusing royal titles offered to them in exchange for giving up piracy. Qing only finally gave up piracy after losing to the Portuguese in the Battle of Tiger's Mouth. Even having lost, China was just so relieved to have Qing Shi under control, they let her keep all the stuff she'd ever stolen. She broke up the Red Fleet Confederation in 1810 and negotiated a generous surrender deal. Not only were the pirates pardoned of their crimes, but some were allowed to keep their vessels and join the Chinese Navy. Some even took positions in the government. Qing herself settled back in China, opened a gambling house, and worked as a military advisor, and married her stepson.
Kicking off the list at number 10, eye patches. Okay, perhaps one of the most notable features of a pirate has to be the old eye patch. If you're a pirate for Halloween and you don't have the eye patch, well, you just look like a hipster. Like, what are you? We don't know. It matters. It's a noticeable detail. But why did so many pirates cover their eyes? Was it because they got poked by Blackbeard? No. You know when you get up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom, and then as soon as you turn the light on, you're blinded for a hot minute, you can't even see, your ears are ringing, you don't even know where you are? It takes your eyes 20 minutes to adjust to darkness, so pirates having to go from the deck to under the ship back and forth, they had to keep one eye in the dark. Or else they'd be covering their eyes for most of their shift, which you really can't have when you're running a tight ship. Nobody has the time for that, so cover your eyes and be blind half the time.
At number 9, walk the plank. I'm sure you have no doubt heard of the term walking the plank, right? It is the stereotypical pirate thing to do when you need to get rid of someone, if you know what I mean. Well, we've sort of been misled by this whole walking the plank thing because rather than it be a method of offing your buddy Joe for not following orders, it was actually used as a method of psychological torture. Now don't get me wrong, pirates had many other imaginative and gruesome ways of unaliving people, but walking the plank really wasn't one of them. It was actually a relatively rare practice as pirates like to do their unaliving practices pretty swiftly. Rather than making their unlucky victim walk a plank into the ocean, the most common form of putting someone 6 feet under, so to speak, was through keel hauling. Keel hauling was where you tied someone to a rope, threw them into the water, and pulled them under the boat and up to the other side. Now you would think that this person could just hold their breath and then survive, but no, not really. Instead, the unlucky soul would be hitting up against the boat and getting shredded by the barnacles on the boat before coming up to the surface. I don't know about you, but after knowing that, I would much rather walk the plank.
Number 8, maps, books, and gold. Just as valuable as gold and silver, back in the day, maps were a treasure in itself. It kind of helps knowing where you're going, to be fair. Also, pirates need to remember where they left their treasure. You can't really rely on a drunken pirate's memory now, can you? These charts would be stolen, obviously, and in turn, these guys would go on a little national treasure Hans Zimmer pirate adventure. One map in particular from the 1680s, the Spanish Atlas, was stolen, and National Geographic called this stolen map extremely valuable pirate booty. So this treasure's still out there somewhere, and somebody's got the directions. Knowledge was key. They didn't have Siri hanging out all day to answer navigational questions. They even had to steal books. Pirates stealing books. What a scene. Some of these pirate heists wouldn't even involve treasure. They would sword fight and just hope that the books on board were worth the battle. Imagine losing countless crew members and all you got is the captain's daily logs. Just sailing the high seas roasting William Kidd's girl problems. You're like, what an idiot!
At number 7, earrings. When you think about what a stereotypical pirate looked like, you probably think of tattered clothing, hats, maybe an eye patch, and earrings. Well, their style, though pretty odd, also had a purpose, specifically the earring. Pirates were very superstitious and their earrings followed in their superstitions as well. There were a lot of different beliefs that pirates had about these earrings. Some pirates believed that it could somehow improve or even cure bad eyesight. Why? No clue. Maybe they thought that ears and eyes were connected or something. I mean, they do start with the same letter. Some pirates also believed that the precious metals that their earrings were made of possessed magical healing powers, so maybe that's why they believed that they would heal their eyes. They also thought that having pierced ears would help them with seasickness, and that having a gold earring would serve as some kind of protective talisman, and that if you wore one, you would be protected from drowning.
Number 6, hooks. Growing up watching cartoons, I've seen many versions of Captain Hook, or pirates that resemble a Captain Hook type villain. They all have the eye patch, earrings, and to make them more menacing, they have hooks for hands. Dustin Hoffman scared the shit out of me growing up in the movie Hook. It's literally called Hook. What's up with this? Well, this wasn't a move by film studios, this was actually historically accurate. Back in those days, they didn't have advanced prosthetic limbs, and when you're sword fighting over loot, well, odds are you're gonna lose a hand or two at one point. These pirates actually got compensation, which is so funny to me, just imagining a pirate filling out an insurance form, that's funny, but their replacement tool was usually a hook or a peg leg. They would just replace your leg with a singular piece of wood. That was the best they could do back then, and it had to work. Another fun little fact, if you got injured, your payroll came out of everybody's collective treasure. So you better have that athletic stance down and dodge some swords, or else you're getting some shame. A lot of shame coming your way.
At number 5, marooning. Let's talk about the brutal yet mysterious practice of marooning, and no, we're not talking about Maroon 5. Marooning was a pirate punishment, probably the most dreaded punishment of them all, where someone who committed a serious offense would be taken to a deserted island and then left there. No food, no water, just you and the island. For many, this was a slow and painful death. Being left on an island in the hot sun meant you got badly sunburnt, you had no food unless you could find something in the area, and chances were that there was no fresh water on that island, so you would become dehydrated quite quickly. At high tide, the water could flood the island, or you would be left standing in water up to your neck, and any predators in the area would have seen you as a little snack. This sounds like a terrible way to go. I could not imagine the physical and psychological torment that would come with such a fate. Man, I'm glad I'm not a pirate.
Number 4, pirate curfew. This next one made me laugh out loud while I was reading up on it. It doesn't matter how badass or cool you think you are, even if you're a literal pirate, you still have a bedtime. These guys would straight up abandon their mateys, they would leave them on an island to die, and then sword fight over treasure. But come 8 o'clock, it's time to shut her down. Because it's pirate code, you can't break the code. Captain Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, he insisted back in 1722 that lights and candles were out at 8 o'clock sharp. If anybody wanted to stay up later than 8, they can go and hang out on the deck. Honestly, I love this rule. I'm here for this. Imagine roommates being on board for this as well. Nowadays, you get the best sleep of your life. Thing is, these guys needed all the time they could get because they had to sleep in hammocks. Not the most comfortable or relaxing environment. A hammock nap, sure, but a hammock sleep every night? No wonder pirates were so angry. It's starting to make sense.
At number 3, cryptic treasure. There once lived a pirate named Olivier Levasseur, and he was considered one of the last great pirates. Over the years, it was said that Levasseur had stolen many treasures of great value and had a large haul of precious finds. Once people finally caught up to him, he was captured and sentenced to death by hanging, but before he died, his final words were, quote, "Find my treasure, the one who may understand it," end quote. And then he threw a cryptogram into the crowd, and that was the last of them. To this day, no one has been able to decipher the code. Some believe that perhaps this cryptic message was simply designed to lead people on a wild goose chase as a final joke. However, in the 20th century, a man named Reginald Herbert Cruz Wilkins, say that 5 times fast, made a breakthrough. He had been searching for the treasure for years and finally found the cave that he believed the treasure was located. Unfortunately, the cave's conditions made it impossible to get through, so the treasure remains a mystery to this day. Can you believe this all started because a pirate wanted to pull a Da Vinci Code on us? Unbelievable.
Number 2, Julius Caesar. Pirates would often take people and demand treasure. They would use hostage situations as a main ploy. In fact, at one point in history, pirates managed to scoop up Julius Caesar. Like the Julius Caesar. The Emperor of Rome went through his fair share of trials, and at just age 25, he was held captive for 38 days with pirates. That's a very long time to hear horrible sea shanties. When pirates demanded ransom for the release of the young man, they set his price for 20 talents, but according to historians, that price was deemed too low from Caesar himself. He actually laughed at it and reminded these pirates that they had no idea who it was they captured. He said to ask for 50 instead of 20. How insane is that?
And finally, at number 1, pirate tunnels. You know the secret tunnel from Avatar: The Last Airbender? Well, the secret pirate tunnel is kind of similar. Below the city of Savannah, Georgia lies a series of underground tunnels that are believed to have been used by pirates. The pirates would use these tunnel systems to smuggle goods in and out of the area, as well as to smuggle captured sailors. It is said that these tunnels would lead directly to the location where the ships would have been waiting in the harbor. Apparently, there is a tunnel that led from a building in town known as as the Pirate's House all the way to the river where small rowing boats would have been waiting. It has also been theorized that the Sons of Liberty, a group of people who strongly opposed the British government, would also use these pirate tunnels to meet up and have a little shindig. There are so many mysteries that surround these pirate tunnels, and many of them remain unsolved.
Number 10. Graf Zeppelin. I wouldn't blame you if you never heard of this beast, but back in the 1940s, aircraft carriers were all the rage, combining the air support and air superiority of airplanes and the naval capabilities of a large ship. They were effective and kind of defined that era. That being said, these bad boys were extremely expensive and tough to build. The Graf Zeppelin was to be the cornerstone of the German naval power, except it never really saw any use. By the end of 1945, Germany was sitting in the timeout corner yet again, and the Soviets, well, not having their own aircraft carrier, thought why not borrow the keys? Makes sense. Well, the test drive just wasn't working out, so they decided to use it as target practice. The large vessel now rests 260 feet below the Baltic Sea and was only discovered in 2006. It's kind of cool. Number 9. The Bismarck. More German naval power flexing. The Bismarck was one of 2 battleships meant to show off that Germany, meant business. Massive ships with a length of 251 meters and a crew of almost 2,000. She was a beast of the seas. After engaging in only a few military operations, her legend quickly made the Royal Navy shiver in their timbers. Who can blame them? And they wanted this thing sunk, and they wanted it sunk bad. So it was time to hunt the Bismarck. And after enough chasing and drama to write a small novel, which I'm pretty sure there's a few, the Bismarck was caught between a rock and a hard place. A well-placed torpedo had given the German giant some serious damage, and not that it was decided that they should scuttle the ship to prevent British from boarding. Regardless of what happened, she now rests at the bottom of the ocean. Number 8. The Nimai Ships. Emperor Caligula was a dude who loved his opulence, but he had his own version of the Jabba the Hutt barge from Return of the Jedi. Pretty sweet. Magnificent pleasure cruises with all the amenities that you'd think a Roman emperor would have. These ships seemed to be lost to time, or at least that was thought. Rumors had spread that Lake Nimai was the final resting place of these legends. Even folks back in the 1400s were curious about such wrecks, as not only did they discover them, but tried to recover them. Sadly, they just didn't have the technology to do so. It wasn't until a certain square-jawed Italian leader and Fascismo and his compadres came about the ship that it would see light again. Pretty cool. However, sadly, during an explosive discussion with the US Artillery Corps, the ships were destroyed in WW2. Pretty cool though, pretty cool. Number 7, the Yamato. You didn't think the Germans were the only bad boys in the ocean with a big old battleship, did you? Well, think again, Buster. The Yamato is the story of Imperial Japanese pride during the 40s and its downfall. Shortly commissioned after Pearl Harbor, she was a gem of Japanese power and status. However, if you didn't skip history class, and you came here for history, which thank you, I appreciate that, you know that things for Japan, bit by bit, got a little worse for them. It all went downhill after the Battle of Midway. Ever since the Battle of Midway, they were on the back of their heels. By 1945, Japan was running low on, well, just about everything but willpower. They're pretty impressive fighters. Somehow, this massive battleship had yet to be sunk. Its final orders were to beach itself at Okinawa and prepare for a defense until it was destroyed. And if you know anything about the Japanese, it's that they are not quitters. Eventually, she was destroyed and lost most of her crew. She now rests at the bottom of the ocean as well. You're gonna find a lot of these are at the bottom of the ocean. That's just gonna happen here. Number 6, the Endurance. Here's a recent discovery for you, and it's actually very cool. The Endurance was a ship helmed by Ernest Shackleton, an explorer in the time of explorers. An explorer's explorer, if you will. He was taking a decent-sized vessel and modest crew to explore the cold waters of Antarctica. How well did that go? Well, the ship was thought to be lost for over 100 years, so yeah, it didn't go very well. The ship got caught in packed ice and it eventually sunk. However, everyone lived, so we like that, that's good. Nice. Well, in March of 2022, not that long ago, it was announced that the ship had been found. Look how good that ship looks for being over 100 years old and sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Supposedly, it's been well preserved because of the cold temperatures. Titanic wishes it looked that good. It don't, but it do, but it wishes. Number 5. The Queen Anne's Revenger. Avast, ye landlubbers! It be the ship of the most fearsome pirate ever set sail on the 7 seas. Blackbeard, the pirate's pirate, and what would a pirate be without his ship, right? The Queen Anne's Revenge was a ship to be reckoned with. With an estimated 40 blam lambs, it would put a hole in your sail, so to speak. Blackbeard was part of the golden age of piracy, the very same that makes you think about pirates and booty. and Johnny Depp. Remember how hot he was in the 80s, right? Right, ladies? He's gorgeous. Anyway, the Queen Anne's Revenge was found in 1996 just off the coast of North Carolina. 24 Blam Blams have been recovered since, all of different weights, sizes, and origins, which adds to the evidence. When you're a pirate on the run, you can't exactly just walk into the cannonade store and ask for some more nautical Blam Blams. You kinda gotta take them wherever you can get them. Number 4, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. SS Edmund Fitzgerald was an American Great Lakes freighter that sank in Lake Superior during a storm on November the 10th, 1975, with the loss of the entire crew of 29 men. When launched on June 7th, 1958, she was the largest ship on North America's Great Lakes, and she remains the largest to have sunk there. She was located in deep water on November 14th, 1975 by US Navy aircraft detecting magnetic anomalies, and found soon afterwards to be in 2 large pieces. Ugh, not a thing you want your ship to be in. If you've ever been to Lake Superior or any of the Great Lakes for that matter, you know sometimes the water there can be a little rough. As a Canadian, I've spent my fair share on most of the Great Lakes, and well, you kinda gotta be there to see them. They feel like seas more than lakes, to be honest, and surprisingly deep at certain points, like stupid deep. The tragedy of the Edmund Fitzgerald even got the Gordon Lightfoot treatment in what is probably the best folk/story song ever written. Goes to show you, even in modern times, the life of a sailor sure ain't easy. Number 3, the USS Arizona. It was a peaceful day just like any other on December 7th, 1941, and not a day that would live in infamy at all. At the Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii, when all of a sudden Japanese planes came barreling out of the sky and unleashed a deliberate attack on the base, destroying ships and fuel reserves, including the USS Arizona. Thousands of people lost their lives, and now America was involved in Japan's world tour. Our American audience knows all about this, or at least I hope so. You might be studying for a test right now, but I'm here to help. However, this may be news to some who live outside the greatest country on earth, or so I'm told. The USS Arizona sunk that day, and it remains there. There's even an interesting memorial that you can visit that basically sits over top of the wreck from a time long past. While this was a major blow to US Navy power at the time, the US would come back kicking strong and eventually push Japan all the way back home. They got it back, fair and square, I think. Number 2, USS Maine. Blame the Maine on Spain, they said in early 20th century propaganda regarding what to do with the lovely island of Cuba. A US ship had gone boom boom in the Havana harbor, and it was exactly what the US needed as a scapegoat to give them some more manifest destiny. And we all love that. Everyone loves manifest destiny. Except it might not have been the Spanish who destroyed the ship. It might have been on purpose or an accident. However, this shipwreck is important for a couple of reasons. One, a war started after this, which historians can take note of, the beginning of imperialist American ideals in Central America. And this was also the war where the one and only Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders got his fame from. So it can't all be that bad, right? It can't be that much of a loss. America ends up with more territory and they get Teddy Roosevelt. That's just a win-win in my books. Number 1, the Santa Maria. It's the ship that discovered America. Good old Christopher Columbus. Imagine a world without America. No apple pie, no George Washington, and no freedom. Oh, I wouldn't want that. How would we ever get on without Hollywood, McDonald's, or our obsession with reality TV? I love you, America. And thank you, Christopher Columbus. Okay, well maybe not thank him actually. America, yes, Chris, no. The dude was actually kind of rotten. We're looking back now, he wasn't so nice. Look, a lot of people weren't back then. The Santa Maria sunk back in 1492 and was salvaged for wood for a base of some sort. I was gonna say, it belongs in a museum. But Chris wasn't exactly the nicest guy, so maybe it's better the ship's gone. Plus, we all know and love a much better Chris anyway. Our Chris, we love that guy, he's great, he's awesome. Yeah.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the MV Goya. This ship was built in Norway in 1940, and it was meant to be a freighter, but in a World War II world. This ship ended up being used as a passenger ship in order to evacuate citizens as a part of Operation Hannibal. This, of course, as anybody could reasonably imagine, meant that the ship was very often overcrowded as they were trying to rescue as many people as possible at the time. On April 16th, 1945, the ship was carrying over 7,000 passengers, which is 5 times the amount of people it could safely carry, when it was hit by a torpedo that was sent from a Soviet submarine just before midnight. The force of the explosion was so great that the ship only took minutes to sink, and since the timing of the incident had most passengers in their beds, you can imagine the outcome. Because of the lack of proper record keeping, in with the absolute panic of trying to rescue people with the imminent threat of attack, it isn't quite clear exactly how many people lost their lives in this wreck, but it is thought that somewhere between 6,000 to 7,000 passed away, which is unbelievable. It is thought that there were around 180 survivors of the wreck, and due to the unbelievable tragedy, the location of the wreck has been officially declared a war grave by Polish authorities. In our number 9 spot today, we have Mont Blanc and Emo. Halifax is a port city that is located here in Canada in the province of Nova Scotia. Halifax was a super important place during the First World War, as it acted as a hot spot for ships that were carrying supplies, troops, ammunition, war stuff. On December 6, 1917, a Norwegian ship called Emo left Halifax, and it ended up colliding with a French ship called the Mont Blanc. This is already disastrous, but what made it significantly worse was the fact that the Mont Blanc held explosives. Because of the collision, the Mont Blanc was pushed towards the shore and ended up setting the harborfront ablaze. Just a few minutes later, the entire ship exploded with a blast so strong that windows 50 miles away were shattered. Unfortunately, there were many people at the waterfront when the explosion happened, which led to a total of 1,800 people dying in this incident. 9,000 people were injured, and it is said that 1,600 homes were destroyed in the blast. The force of this blast really cannot be understated. It was so powerful that it caused a tidal wave and violent tremors, which uprooted trees from the ground, damaged railroad tracks, and destroyed numerous buildings whose debris was scattered hundreds of yards away. In the end, this is what made this explosion one of the most violent non-nuclear explosions in history, and what makes it likely the world's largest accidental man-made explosion. In our number 8 spot today, we have the SS Cap Arcona. This ship was a German luxury ocean liner that was launched in 1927, but by the time the mid-1940s rolled around, this one was put to use to help the country's war efforts. This time, this ship was converted into a prison ship. On April of 1945, with the advance of the British Army, prisoners being held at concentration camps were being loaded onto ships, and the Cap Arcona was one of them. On May 3, 1945, with more than 6,000 people on board, the ship was attacked by the British Air Force. The prisoners on board were being held below deck at the time, and the ship was not marked with any sort of Red Cross, so unfortunately those in the British Air Force did not realize that the ship was filled with prisoners at the time. The ship capsized, but did not sink entirely, but still this wreck caused somewhere around 5,000 deaths. In our number 7 spot today, we have the MV La Julia. This was a ship that was owned by the Senegalese government, and despite the fact that it was designed to carry a maximum of 580 passengers, on September 26, 2002, this ship had at least 2,000 people on board. This is obviously a huge issue, and this coupled with the fact that there was a large amount of people who were sleeping on the ship's deck, which of course is above the center of buoyancy, only made matters worse. The ship was en route to the Senegalese capital of Dakar, and as it sailed farther out to sea than it was licensed to sail, it ended up encountering a storm and really rough waters. The ship ended up capsizing, and out of the 2,000 on board, only 64 people survived the entire ordeal. Not only was this because of the fact that the ship sank exceptionally quickly, but it's mostly because rescue was not sent out until several hours after the entire ordeal. This wreck is thought to be one of the worst non-military disasters in all of maritime history. Despite the severity of the situation, no one has been charged or prosecuted for this disaster to this day. In our number 6 spot today, we have the RMS Lancastria. This ship was a British ocean liner, but in April of 1940 she was reconstructed to be a troop ship under the command of Captain Rudolph Sharp. He sent the ship off to help aid in the evacuation of British troops and citizens from France, and on June 14, 1940, the ship departed from Liverpool. On June 16th, the ship anchored near the town of Saint Nazaire, and the following day somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 refugees loaded on board. This included civilians, soldiers, and other military officials. While carrying all of these people, around 4 p.m. on June 17th, the German Junkers Ju 88 bombed the ship, which caused it to capsize and sink in an extremely fast 20 minutes. This caused over 1,400 400 tons of fuel to leak into the water, some part catching fire, and while there were 2,477 survivors, no one is quite sure how many people lost their lives. This is because it was obviously a hectic rescue mission that had people rushing aboard. No one is quite sure just how many people were on board before the attack happened, but it is thought that somewhere from 4,000 to 6,500 people might have lost their lives during this, which is a terrifying number. In our number 5 spot today, we have the SS General Slocomb. This passenger steamboat was built in Brooklyn, New York, and on June 15, 1904, it was carrying members of the St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church as they were on their way to a church picnic. They were traveling up the East River on the way to Long Island Sound when a fire started in the lamp room. Considering the fact that the lamp room was obviously filled with lamp oil, while a fire on board a ship is never good, this is one of the worst case scenarios. Lamp oil, oil rags, a nearby paint locker, and a cabin filled with gasoline actually are what created this worst case scenario. The safety equipment of this ship was not nearly up to standards, as it was rarely even checked, and when the crew attempted to get the fire hose in order to put out the flames, they found a rotten fire hose that crumbled in their hands. The life jackets being given out to people began to fall apart, and they couldn't even access the lifeboats at all. I cannot even imagine the panic people were feeling at this point. Many of the passengers saw no other option and they jumped in the water to try and swim, but like many Americans at the time, they didn't know how, and they were wearing heavy wool clothes which only worked to weigh them down. At the end of the day, it is said that around 1,021 people lost their lives in this absolutely tragic event. In our number 4 spot today, we have the SS Kianya. On December 4th, 1948, this ship was carrying thousands of passengers who were fleeing Shanghai due to the advancing People's Liberation Army. On this day, the official number of passengers was said to be 2,150, which was already almost double its capacity, but it said that several thousand more people crowded onto this ship right before it left the docks. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. It's weighing the risk of packing onto this boat versus staying in the situation you're currently trying to flee. As this ship got to the mouth of the Hangpu River, it is believed that it may have struck some sort of World War II era mine or something, because it just exploded. Rescuers were also unaware of the explosion for hours, which only made the situation worse. Somewhere around 700 passengers were rescued, but this meant that a number estimated to be somewhere from 2,750 to as many as 4,000 people lost their lives in this explosion and the subsequent sinking of the ship. In our number 3 spot today, we have the HMS Armenia. This was a Soviet passenger ship that was first launched in November of 1928, and she had a maximum capacity of 980 passengers. During the Second World War, this ship was put to use by transporting troops, and from October 9th, 1941, the ship was used to evacuate soldiers, workers, and materials from Odessa. In November of 1941, there was the invasion of German troops that led to an extreme rush to evacuate the hospitals in the city of Sevastopol, and the Armenia was repurposed again into a hospital ship. This led to about 4,000 wounded people and medical personnel from 11 different hospitals being loaded onto the ship to set sail towards Yalta. Once there, another 1,000 passengers were loaded onto the ship in a rush, none of which were officially recorded. On November 7th, the ship was attacked by a German Henkel HE-111 bomber, and in just 4 minutes the ship sadly sank, taking the lives of almost everyone on board. Just 8 people survived. In German records, there was no mention that the Armenia was a hospital ship, so it's unclear if they omitted that detail or if they mistakenly believed that it was a troop carrier. Either way, it is absolutely devastating. In our number 2 spot today, we have the SS Principe Umberto. This ship was built in 1909 as an Italian passenger ship, but in the times during the First World War, it ended up being converted into an armed merchant cruiser. On June 8, 1916, the ship was transporting troops on the Adriatic Sea. These troops were a part of the 55th Infantry Regiment, and they were on their way back from Albania to Italy. Although this ship was accompanied by others, it still ended up being struck by an Austro-Hungarian U-5 submarine that had launched a torpedo attack. This ship ended up sinking just minutes later, and it is said that this disaster took the lives of 1,926 men, making it the worst naval disaster of the First World War in terms of lives lost. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Yamato. The Yamato was a Japanese battleship that served in the Second World War. She was the lead ship of her class of battleships, and she was one of two of the heaviest and most powerfully armed battleships ever constructed. On April 7th, 1945, the ship was about 300 kilometers south of the Japanese island of Kyushu when it was confronted by a US carrier-based aircraft. This aircraft bombed the ship, which led to it capsizing. This then caused the ammunition on board to explode, which tore the ship in two. After a total of 13 torpedo hits and 8 bomb hits, the ship completely sunk. The ship was accompanied by a light cruiser and 4 other destroyers, which were all sunk in this event as well. This sadly led to thousands of deaths, as most of the crew lost their lives in this battle.
Number 10. Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan ruled the Caribbean and people feared his name. Mid-1600s. He's most famous for his attacks on Spanish vessels and plundering and raiding towns. He had a powerful Jamaican fleet, and folk stories claim that he may have overtaken more than 300 vessels and ships during his entire life as a pirate. Massive raids, 30 ships, 1,500 men easy, town to town, stealing enormous wealth. A pirate's pirate. He was later arrested and taken to England, but there he was actually pardoned, knighted by Charles II, and sent back to Jamaica to continue his place amongst the plantations. Again, these were not cool pirates. Most of them were really evil people who believed in some pretty evil things. But again, I'm not going to start judging a pirate on doing bad things. It's a pirate, so. Number 9, Captain Kidd. As always, if you dig this video, comment down below what other pirate tales you know of. Maybe we got a part 2 brewing. Who knows? Scottish sailor William Kidd, aka Captain Kidd, born around 1645. Kidd was a privateer with the British and was even commissioned to arrest other pirates. Dude, that's sick. Just like a pirate vigilante out there. Kind of being a pirate when he wants type deal, you know? Kidd famously captured a huge ship, the Quedagh Merchant, in 1698, filled to the brim with gold, silver, silk, satin, you name it. He was officially a pirate, although he didn't like being called that. He considered himself the Robin Hood type pirate. He even made his men give back stolen things that he didn't okay. So Kidd left the Caribbean, traveled to New York to clear his name, but when there, he was arrested for being a pirate and ultimately tried and executed. His body was on display from the banks of the River Thames as a warning to other pirates. That's just barbaric. Like, is that really necessary? Number 8. Anne Bonny. Anne was an Irish pirate operating out of the Caribbean and one of the few infamous female pirates in recorded history. She grew up, married a nice sailor, and moved to Nassau, Bahamas. There she met and fell in love with the infamous pirate John Calico Jack Rackham and took on a life of pirating and plundering the 7 seas with him. Dude, that's sick. Why aren't there like 14 movies about her? She met another pirate, and the small crew of 3 grew to one of the most infamous and revered outfits of the oceans. Anne Bonny wore men's jackets, long trousers, a handkerchief tied around her head, machetes, pistols, like 12th Night, but like the real deal, dude. She was ultimately captured alongside Rackham in 1720. The crew was sentenced to death, but Bonny, being pregnant at the time, was pardoned for about 9 months. Number 7, Mary Read, aka Mark Read, was an English pirate born in 1685 and among the few women known to have been convicted and engage in piracy at the height of the golden age of pirates. Again, like Anne, she was a toughie. From the age of 12, she found herself disguising herself to work on ships as a gunner, laborer, and gunpowder handler. Read's ship was unfortunately taken by pirates, whom she willingly joined, but then rejoined her crew in a mutiny. In 1720, she then met and joined pirate Calico Jack and his companion, Anne Bonny, who both believed her to be a man. She joined the crew and eventually gained the love and trust of both of them, and her time as a pirate was successful but short-lived. Although Jack Rackham was swiftly executed, both Read and Bonny were pregnant and received delayed sentences. Yeah, again, where are the movies? Number 6. Henry Avery, aka the Arch Pirate, aka the King of Pirates. Avery was famous for being one of the few pirate captains to escape with his loot without being arrested or killed in battle. Mid-1690s, Avery's pirate career only lasted 2 years though. His exploits captured the public's imagination so fast that it inspired others to become pirates and spawned tons of literary works around him. That being said, he wasn't like a cool badass pirate. This guy was rotten. Like, did things that are terrible to people. It's cool and all being a pirate and stuff, but it's not all Jack Sparrow type stuff all the time. This guy was feared by the feared people, you know? He was cruel. His fate was never known as he was captured. He just kind of disappeared. Number 5. Howell Davis. Howell Davis was a Welsh pirate born in 1690. His pirate career lasted only 11 months, from July 1718 to June 1719, when he was ambushed and killed. His ships were the Cadogan, the Buck, the St. James, and the Rover. Davis captured more than 15 English and French ships in those 11 months. Whoa. Having enjoyed the short career, this young pirate captured the entire Caribbean's attention with his navigational skills and daring nature to take on ships much larger than his own. He was pretending to be a legitimate privateer, commanding naval ships until he snuck on and held them up. He would fly black flags from ships in the area to pretend that he had a bigger fleet. When he tried to kidnap the governor of Portugal, acting like he was a Royal Navy pirate hunter, they caught on though, and he was ambushed. Ballsy pirate, very ballsy. Sneaking around all Assassin's Creed Black Flag style ship to ship. Dude, I love it. Number 4, Bartholomew Roberts. Bartholomew Roberts, aka Black Bart, born 1682, was a Welsh pirate who raided ships in the Americas and West Africa early to the mid-1700s. When I say he raided ships, I mean he was the most successful pirate during the golden age of piracy if we are measuring how many vessels were actually stolen. He captured, looted, and kept over 400 ships. That's like 400 battles. 400 times he was like, hey, yeah, we're gonna take your ship, okay? His largest flagship was a 40-cannon behemoth. It was sailed by over 200 men. The ship could fight off any British Royal Navy ship at the time. A notorious pirate. He was young when he started pirating too, learning under Howell Davis on how to actually pirate. He was a natural. He came up with pirate codes too. No talking about money, no fights on the ship, everybody has a say. He learned the do's and don'ts, and then he pretty well captured the entire region of the Caribbean and West Indies. Yeah. Number 3, Calico Jack. Calico Jack, John Rackham, was one of the most unique pirates during the golden age of piracy. Born in England, not very charismatic, and failed to get an enormous wealth, but what he did go down in history for was his flag designs and for his 2 female pirate crew members / love interests whom he shared romantic relationships with, camaraderie with, and sword fights back to back with. He started on a small crew pirating small vessels until he stole a much larger ship named the Kingston and became the captain of his crew. While in port, he met a young lady by the name of Anne Bonny, a married woman whom he'd run off to sea with. The flag commonly associated with Rackham depicts the classic white skull above crossed swords on a black background, and Rackham is credited with inventing and designing the quote, Jolly Roger first design. Dude, artist, lover, pirate, again, where are these movies? Number 2, Qing Shi. Born in 1775 in Guangdong province, Qing was thrown into work as she was famous within the province for her beauty, hospitality, and intelligence, attracting a certain pirate Zheng Yi in 1801 who asked for her hand in marriage. She agreed, but only if she was paid a heavy price and she could command his ship and crew. She began implementing strict guidelines about equality, status or sex aside. Qing took full control with progressive policies, and even other fleets joined her pirate empire, creating the largest pirate fleet in history known as the Red Flag Fleet. We're talking thousands she commanded. She had 3 rules. If you sneak off, you're out. If you steal, you're out. And if you harass women, you're out. Coined the Pirate Queen, Qing even broke up the Confederation in 1810 and negotiated a deal with the Chinese government. The pirates were pardoned for their crimes, allowed to keep their vessels, and even had a place amongst the Chinese army. And coming at the number 1 spot, of course, Blackbeard. Edward Teach, born 1680 in Bristol, England. He's probably the most infamous and revered pirates on this list and in history of the 7 seas. Blackbeard intimidated enemies by coiling smoking fuses into his long braided facial hair and by slinging multiple pistols and daggers across his chest. Can you imagine? This guy must have been terrifying to look at. In 1717, he captured a French ship, renamed it the Queen Anne's Revenge, and decked it out with about 50 guns. With that firepower then, he blockaded the port of Charlestown, South Carolina, holding the entire town at ransom until the residents met his demands for their huge supply of medicines. After laying low after holding up a town, Blackbeard was then killed in battle by the British Navy out for his arrest. Legend says that he had 20 stab wounds and 5 bullet wounds before finally sinking to Davy Jones' locker. His head was suspended from the bow of the enemy ship and then placed upon a spike at Chesapeake Bay for years, warning other pirates of his capture and demise. Dude, dark times, huh?